whether you want it to happen or not, whether you believe it's going to happen or not, I would bet my life that in 10 years in the future, our day-to-day lives are going to be unrecognizable. I'm 57. I'm a grandma. I'm retired. And I think a lot about artificial intelligence, believe it or not. And here's why and how I think about it. Now, part of the reason why I think about artificial intelligence is that in my career life, I worked at companies that had a lot to do with exponential technologies and things like robotics and artificial intelligence and nanotechnology and you name it, all of the emerging technologies. I was steeped in that world. So that's partly why I think about it. But in terms of the future, the present and the future, the reasons that I think about artificial intelligence is because it is going to affect our lives. It is going to affect our lives significantly, and it's going to happen a lot faster than people think. Then there are also the emotional, psychological changes that are going to happen. And when we start to imagine what the future might look like, and we start to think about how our lives will be affected by that future, it's really helpful to be a little bit knowledgeable, to understand a little bit about what those possibilities could be, so that when those changes actually start happening, it's not quite as scary. Now, I will also back up here and say that there is a lot about artificial intelligence and robotics in particular that can be very scary when you think about them. I am very aware of all of or most of the ways that could go wrong, the negative aspects of that happening, the downsides, the things that everybody, when you think about how people are afraid of artificial intelligence, I get that. Humanity has not had a great track record in using technology only for good. Every technology that has ever been created has been used for good and for bad. So you can't really separate it. However, you can approach it with a scarcity mindset, or you can approach it with an abundance mindset. And, maybe I drank the Kool-Aid of where I was working before, but I very much believe that having an abundance mindset while being aware of the potential downsides and the things to, the watch outs is the way that I want to approach it. I see so many possibilities in artificial intelligence and how it can help us as humans, from medical advancements to completely changing the way that we think about work and what we do on a daily basis, to longevity. Like, there's so many different things, efficiencies, coming up with ways to fix our earth with all of the ways that we've been destroying it. There's so many different things that artificial intelligence can do to make our lives better. That's what I like to focus on. Now, let me give you some idea about how I think about it in terms of my family. So for me, I'm 57, and I know that my life is going to be significantly different 5-10 years from now. Not even 10 years from now. It's going to happen a lot faster than we think. It's going to be different. Just like our world is different now with the internet than it was before the internet, except that this is going to happen much faster. And I think I'm almost positive that it is going to have a more broad impact in terms of affecting everything we do. Now, if you're in your 70s or 80s, do you need to be as concerned about it or think as much about it? Probably not. You are not going to have to make a living in that future. You are not going to have to do as much moving about on a day-to-day basis or, using tech tools or whatever it is. It's just not going to affect you as much, but it will affect you somewhat. I think about the days when ATMs became a thing. That was a technology back in the day that I know my grandparents had to adjust to. And my grandfather was adamant that he did not trust automatic teller machines. And he had to go into the bank and he would not put his card. He wanted a passbook. He didn't want a card. He just didn't want to use ATMs. And I don't think he ever did. But we still had some choices there. The way that technology changes and the rate at which it changes now is so much faster and so much more widespread that there are going to be a lot of things that you just don't have a choice about. We're going to have to change how we think about things and how we do things. Now, if you're in your 40s, you will absolutely have to be making these changes to your mindset. And there are ways that your life is going to be impacted that you don't even know, that we don't even know yet. And so how you think about it might be very different than somebody who is in their 60s and 70s and 80s and beyond. One of the things that I think about a lot is the world that my children who are in their 30s and my grandchildren who are, just 1 and 2 years old right now, the world that they live in is going to be so incredibly different. And I want to understand what effects that might have on them. And I want to understand how their world might be different. For instance, I believe that neither one of my granddaughters is ever going to have to know how to drive a car. Self-driving cars are going to be more and more prolific, and really there's an efficiency there. If we don't have to own our own cars, but we can call a self-driving car that can show up within a couple minutes and take us, to school or take us wherever, it's going to completely change how they do things. But really, think about that. My grandkids will never have to learn how to drive a car. It's still mind-blowing to me. Also thinking about the state of education. They probably will not ever have to, or maybe even get to, go to a typical 4-year university. The way that we learn and what we learn and how it's going to happen is already changing so dramatically. And we saw that during COVID, how, things shifted to the online world. But imagine every single person, every single kid and adult having an AI, assistant or an AI professor who understands how they learn best and can teach them whatever they want to learn, however it works best for them to learn. Now, that doesn't mean we should completely do away with classrooms or that I have anything against teachers. That's not at all what I'm saying. I don't think there is ever going to be a replacement for the value that we get from face-to-face interaction with human beings. I'm not challenging that at all. I'm saying that the weight at which, everything used to be in person in a classroom with a teacher and students, and that's already changing, and it's just going to change more. And so the ratio of the person-to-person teaching versus the electronic, artificial intelligence teaching is going to change dramatically. And so, there's a part of me that's really sad that maybe they won't get to experience that university life. I loved college. It was that perfect in between of being an adult and being independent, but also not being totally an adult and independent. Some of the best years of my life. And it's a little sad that maybe most people, if not all people, will not get that at some point. But there are other positives that balance that out. And I think that, especially when you think about kids and people who learn differently, we talk a lot about in the school systems learning differences, like people with autism, or people who have ADHD, or people who are dyslexic, or people who are introverts versus extroverts. There are just so many different ways to learn, auditory versus visual versus tactile, so many different ways to learn. Wouldn't it be amazing if each person could learn exactly in the way that's suited to them? Imagine how much more we would learn. Imagine how much stress would be taken out of a classroom if each kid was getting what they needed and the classroom was just sort of a meeting place to connect and exchange ideas with the people in that classroom and with the teacher, and to have a community experience. But the the content of the learning happens in your way, on your time, in the way that suits you best. Wow, that would be spectacular. And that's going to happen. So I think about those kinds of things. That's just two examples, the cars and the education, that I think about my grandchildren and how their lives will be so different. And the last piece, the last bucket I want to talk about is how I think about artificial intelligence and robotics, especially the combination of the two, and how it's going to affect our world, both in the short term and in the long term, and what I'm doing about that and how I think about that. And the nuts and bolts of it are that I believe, again, with an abundance mindset, I believe that there is a very strong path that leads us to a future where artificial intelligence significantly improves the human day-to-day life, that our quality of life can be significantly better if we don't have to deal with all kinds of things that artificial intelligence will just do for us or do with us. And I also recognize all the ways that could go wrong. Again, I'm not, just looking through rose-colored glasses here. I very much am aware of all of the scary, fearful things that could happen. I'm choosing not to assume that that's going to happen. I'm choosing to have, like I said, an abundance mindset and to think of this in a positive way. What I do think is going to be really, really hard is the transition between now and then. There's a messy middle in there, and it could get really, really messy. And especially as I'm saying this now in the United States in 2025, things are already turning totally chaotic, and there's a lot to fear. There's a lot of uncertainty. There are a lot of unknowns. And I think that as artificial intelligence starts to replace certain jobs and changes the way we think about our financial institutions and our financial structures and how we think about just everything, literally every part of life, it's going to get really messy before it works itself out to that abundant future that I believe in. And in the meantime, some of the things that I think about, and my husband and I think about together, is how can we shore up our family? How can we shore ourselves up and our family to get through that really difficult, messy middle? Being as self-sustaining as possible, not having to rely on jobs. We are looking at, instead of selling the house that we have to buy the house of our dreams now that we're in retirement and, we really just want to kind of settle down. Instead of that, we're thinking about, well, maybe we get sort of a compound type property where we can have multiple houses so that we can all just live in the same area if things get really bad. Or maybe we buy 3 smaller houses, one for us, one for each of our kids, that, they may not be anything special, but they are solid. And everybody at least has a place to live, and then we can take the rest from there. And I know that sounds kind of scary, and we're not preppers. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Like, do what you want to do. But to the extent that we can make the next 5 to 10 years as stress-free and as unchaotic as possible, that's kind of what we're thinking about. Now, there are a number of different ways we can do that, and we are very lucky to be in the position that we're in, to have some choices like this. And I know that most people aren't in that position. But that's what we're thinking about, in the next 5 to 10 years it's going to be unrecognizable. Whether you want it to happen or not, whether you believe it's going to happen or not, I would bet my life that in 10 years in the future, our day-to-day lives are going to be unrecognizable. And we can get into the philosophy of that and the psychology of that and whether it's good or bad or whatever. You're going to think what you want to think, but this is just my 2 cents. I would strongly urge you to start paying, if you're not already, to start paying attention to what's happening in the world of artificial intelligence. I'm going to put some resources in the description below that might help you. And I understand that everybody has a different level of understanding of what artificial intelligence is. What's artificial intelligence? What's artificial general intelligence? What's artificial super intelligence? They're all different things. And there are very scary ways to think about it and very hopeful ways to think about it and everything in between. If I can leave you with one resource, and again, I'll put some links in the description, but one voice to really listen to if you want to lean into that abundance mindset, but without burying your head in the sand. There's a gentleman by the name of Gawdat who I adore him, and I listen to anything I possibly can from him, although I try to take it in little bits because I too get overwhelmed. He is a real voice of reason that both, like I said, is very positive and sees the abundance of artificial intelligence and the inevitability of artificial intelligence, as well as very deeply understanding the downsides of it and what we have to watch out for. So listen to Mo. Listen to him. And if he jives with you, great. If he doesn't, find somebody else. And again, like I said, I will put as many resources as I can in the description. And I'm going to be doing more videos on this subject. I know some of you are completely uninterested, although if you've made it this far, you're probably pretty interested. But I really want to show people that it doesn't have to just be a scary situation, and we do need to pay attention to the scary possibilities. So it's both. Okay, well, I've been thinking a lot about doing this video and wasn't sure how to approach it, and my husband encouraged me to just sit down and do it. Just do it. So here it is. He and I will be on future videos talking together about more specifics about artificial intelligence in particular. And I hope that you found this useful. And if you haven't already, please like this video. Please subscribe to my channel if you want more videos about retirement, or like I said, I'll be doing more on artificial intelligence as well. I know they seem completely disconnected, but it's something that retired folks need to be thinking about. So there it is. I appreciate you. Thank you so much for being here, and I will see you next time.